我们永远怀念启光弟兄。
We will always remember Brother David.
他是我们亲爱的同工，
He is our very dear co-worker,
是我们追求侍奉的同伴。
also our companion in pursuing the Lord.
他是主兴起的战士，
He is a warrior whom the Lord raised up,
牧者，
and a pastor,
主的见证人。
a witness of the Lord.
他是我们在各方面学习的榜样。
He's our example in many, many aspects.
启光弟兄是一位祷告的人，
He is a man of prayer also,
他也是一位行动的人。
and he's a man of action.
有什么事情告诉启光弟兄，你不会期待他只是说我为你祷告。
Whenever you tell him something, you don't just sit there and wait, and he said that he will pray for you.
当我们当中有一段时间需要讲员的资源，
And for some time, we needed speakers.
启光弟兄义不容辞的来安排。
And right away, he would arrange for us.
去年伯莫纳教会买会所，
Last year, our church was buying a building.
我记得我们刚好来参加夏令特会，
And it was also the time when we came to the summer conference.
就在餐厅那里，
And we were in the dining hall.
有位管音响的，是我们当中负责音响的，
A brother who was responsible for sound,
他在跟别人谈论
he was talking with someone
有一个录影的设备要买1000块的呢，还是买4000多块的？
that there's an audio visual system. Should we buy the one with $1,000
或者是4000多块？
or $4,000?
没想到没有多久，启光弟兄他拿了一张3000块的支票，
Not knowing that very soon he gave a check for $3,000.
他说为神的家就买好的。
He said, "For the house of God, you need to buy something better."
他是有行动的，
He is a man of action.
在几次的特会
And in the few conferences,
在这里举行，
and they were held here,
启光弟兄带着同工们一大早非常早就开车到南加州去。
Brother David with a few co-workers, they would get up very early in the morning and drive down to Los Angeles
和那边的同工们一起祷告，一起交通，
and pray and share with the co-workers
他
there.
传递他的负担。
And he will pass on his burden,
无论讲到要兴起发光，
whether it is to brighten the corner where we are,
无论是讲到你们要做比这更大的事，
or to do greater things,
或者说要去，
or go,
他带着一个很沉重的负担，
with a heavy burden in his heart,
很深的一个使命感。
and with a deep burden in his heart, a sense of mission.
我们的里面满了感谢和赞美。
Our hearts will fill with thanks and praises.
在弟兄生病之后，
After brother got ill,
他跟我们交通，
he shared with us
神给他的话，
the word that the Lord gave him,
神怎么样要炼净他，
how God is to cleanse him,
神要得着一个贵重的器皿，
and that God is to obtain a noble vessel,
神怎么样在一个波饼聚会中告诉他，
and how God told him in a breaking of bread meeting
神爱他就爱他到底。
that God loves him and loves him to the end.
在这么长的时间，
In such a long time,
我们一直祷告，
we kept praying.
我们也相信主啊，你做成了我们的弟兄，有更大的工作在等着他。
And we all believe that after God cleansed him and healed him, greater work is awaiting him.
我想许许多多弟兄姊妹也是这样祷告。
And I believe many of us pray that too.
我们求主，在德着弟兄还有好多的工作在等着。
We ask the Lord to heal him because more work awaiting for him.
但是弟兄姊妹，
But brothers and sisters,
到了有一个时候，
when the time came,
我们来到主的面前，
we came to the Lord.
我们问主说：“主啊，为什么？”
We asked him why.
有一天，主让我里面有一个清楚的感觉，
And one day the Lord gave me a very clear feeling
主的意念高过我们的意念，
that his thoughts are higher than ours.
他的道路高过我们的道路，
And his ways are higher than our
他得
ways.
着宝贵的器皿，
He obtained a noble vessel,
他炼净他，
and he cleansed him
成全他，
and perfected him
是要成为教会的祝福。
to become a blessing to the church.
我们不再只是看见弟兄他自己手中的工作，
No longer we see the work in our brother's hands,
我们看见更大神的祝福、神的工作在他的家里面。
but that we see the greater work, greater blessings upon his home.
我看见去年8月弟兄在一个特会里面，
Last year in August,
他 释放完了信息，
After our brother gave a message,
他带领弟兄姊妹唱一首诗歌，
he led brothers and sisters to sing a hymn.
他唱到我今登巍巍高山，
That now I am up on the mountain,
我经饮滚滚的活泉，
and that I am also experiencing this river flowing.
我今天是居荣美之地。
And today I'm dwelling in Beulah land.
弟兄姊妹，我们的弟兄他现在是在荣美之地，
Our brother is now in the Beulah land.
他在属天属灵的境界，
He is in the heavenly and glorious realm.
登巍巍的高山，
He is up on the mountaintop
饮滚滚的活泉。
and river flowing.
弟兄，他的生命
Our brother's life
要影响我们的一生。
affects all of our lives.
我们祷告，
And we pray.
感动启光弟兄的灵，
The spirit that moved Brother David
加倍的感动我们。
will move us in double portion.
我们永远怀念弟兄。
We'll always remember our brother.
接下来，我们请问弟兄他2位可爱的女儿，要在这边献上他们感谢的话。
Now we have the 2 daughters of Brother David, Sister Emily and Sister Laurie Jeng, to give their words of appreciation.
My dad was a man of God and a selfless leader, but he was also my dad, and I want to share with you the kind of father that my dad was. This past week, many family friends told me that my dad was so proud of me and Emily, and that he was not worried about our futures because he believed in us. These words have brought me such comfort and peace, because I had been afraid of being a source of uncertainty and worry for the family. Hearing these words made me remember how much my dad believed in me, how much he supported me, and how proud he was of me. When I joined the basketball team in middle school, my dad was so excited for me. I'm sure everyone here remembers how much my dad loves sports, especially basketball. I remember that even when my dad came home very tired from church, he would practice basketball with me in our backyard before dinner. To be honest, I was never good, yet my dad still made sure to go to my basketball games, and I can remember how loudly he cheered my name when the coach sent me in for the last 2 minutes. He never mentioned how I double dribbled the second I got the ball because I was so nervous. Instead, he showed more interest in my middle school girls team than he did in the Lakers. I think the only way to truly express how supportive my dad was is to use his own words. In high school and college, I began to spend many late nights in my room studying. During this time, my dad started checking in on me, or what I considered as spying. Sometimes he would just stand outside my door and peer in from the crack for a really long time. Sometimes he would wander into my room and settle himself comfortably onto my bed so that I would know he was there to stay for the long haul. Other times, he would shuffle around my room and pick things up and place them back down again. I will be honest, I was kind of annoyed. As a teenager, I just wanted my privacy. I understood that he wanted to make sure I was okay, but I also knew he really enjoyed bothering me to get a reaction out of me. One time, he entered my room and heard me drawing in a deep breath, and he declared, "I can already tell you are very annoyed, but I just want to tell you I am here for moral support. You have my unwavering moral support." Then he sat down on my bed and made himself at home again. During the time, we all laughed and thought it was funny, but now I realize how true that statement was throughout my entire childhood, how true that statement still is today, and how true that statement will be as he continues to watch over me. He is there for moral support. I have his unwavering moral support. Another thing I am eternally grateful to my dad for is his insistence on holding family worship. My dad believed in the importance of praying and reading the Bible as a family. It's funny because yesterday Aunt Annie shared about the feeling of dread when my dad would stand up and announce it was time for Bible study. I knew exactly how she felt. In our family, my dad would stand up and announce, while we were still eating dinner, family worship in 30 minutes. When I think about it, he has so much determination and perseverance. I think if anyone saw the facial expressions I wore to family worship, they would feel so discouraged. Yet, he knew how vital it is to be able to pray and search for God, so he spent time doing these things with me and Emily. I truly believe that because he established a tradition of seeking God as a family in both me and Emily, he has equipped us with the ultimate tool we would need to face life. When I think about these carefree days from the past, the last 18 months become so surreal to me. I think it is easy and tempting to get angry at God and demand an explanation for all the pain and misery we went through. Yet underneath all the confusion and sadness, I know that God has been watching over my family every single step of the way. The most obvious way I can see his mercy is that for the last year and a half, God dramatically slowed down the pace of my family. Before, each one of us was so busy with our own schedules, our own plans. But in the last year and a half, Emily and I were able to come back home often and enjoy time at home with my parents, whether we were in our house or in the hospital. I will always treasure the times the four of us sat together and discussed what we learned in school or debated over history and politics. Apparently, we all had very diverse views, and my dad's greatest fear was that Berkeley would turn me into a liberal. He always looked me in the eyes and said, "Laurie, we must stand firm. We cannot be swayed by any isms." Even though these last 18 months have been painful, I will always treasure the joy we also felt as the four of us spent time together as a family. Just as God provided words of strength and encouragement to us throughout my dad's illness, he gave us comforting and reassuring words the day after my dad passed away through our church's daily Bible reading. Aunt Flora shared about this yesterday, and hearing her song once again comforted my heart. Psalms 21, verses 3 through 4 says, "You welcomed him with rich blessings and placed a crown of pure gold on his head. He asked you for life, and you gave it to him, length of days forever and ever." Though I was still deeply hurt and saddened, I realized that the doubt and confusion of my heart could not compare to the eternal glory that God welcomed my dad into. Although all through my dad's sickness, we kept praying that God would keep my dad alive, but in our narrow-minded understanding, we grasped onto this temporary life. Yet these verses reminded me that life on this earth is always short, but real life is eternal life with God. I understand now that God heard our prayers, and he gave my dad life, length of days forever and ever. At the end of all this, I just want to thank you all so incredibly much. I want to thank you for all the support and love everyone has shown my family. I am touched when I think of the people who visited my parents in the hospital, prepared food, made house visits, and much more to help my parents in any way they could. I am in such awe when I think about how you loved us like your own family. Although I still feel the loss of my father so deeply, I look around today and I feel as though I've gained so many more family members than all of you. From the depths of my heart, I thank you.
I want to thank God first and foremost for the wonderful 24 years that I had to spend with my dad. I want to especially thank God for the past 18 months in which I got to know my dad. For the first 22 years of my life, I knew my dad as this larger-than-life leader. He was charismatic, articulate, and sharp. We traveled all over the world with him as kids. We listened to him preach at church and at conferences. We saw him enrapture his audience with his words. He inspired us with his vision. He was always moving forward. In person, my dad could talk about anything. He liked talking about politics, history, current events in sports. He made friends easily. He could be best friends with someone 2 minutes after meeting them. He was also just so funny. It's not often that you interact with him and you don't end up laughing until your sides hurt. But I am especially thankful that God called me home these past 18 months. Although at the time I was oblivious and just thought, great, now I have to move back into my old room. God knew that there was another side to my dad that I still needed to know. I needed time to know my dad's heart. In the past, my dad was a very fast-moving person. The rest of us were always just trying to keep up. However, in these past 18 months, he was forced to slow down. And as painful as it was to see him so sick, it allowed us to have some truly wonderful moments together. I believe that the best gift that God gave us was time. There were so many times when Laurie and I would come home from work or school or church, and we would go straight into my dad's room, plop down on that bed, and just talk. And we talked for hours. We would bring home stories, and we laughed so hard because the world is an interesting place, and people do interesting things. Amidst sickness, hospitals, and extreme weariness, there was such joy, such love, and such hope during those moments. We lived as if those days would last forever. Our God is a good God. Back in April, I got into a minor car accident in Davis. At this time, my dad was already pretty weak. I was pretty traumatized by the accident because all these police cars and fire trucks showed up with their sirens on. I kept telling myself that I was an adult and that I needed to handle this by myself. So I did. But I was pretty shaken up and I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole afternoon. Then, around 9 p.m., I get a text from my dad that says, "Mommy and I are coming to visit you. We will be there in 30 minutes." If you've ever been around my dad, you can sort of imagine the assertive tone of this text. At that point, the only thing you can really say is, "Oh, okay, I guess you're already on the way." But then my parents show up at my apartment, and my mom, she's carrying all these bags with all this food inside. And my dad just marches into my living room and he tells me, "Emily, you're okay. Don't be afraid." I realized in that moment just how much I needed my dad. Although I considered myself an adult, in many ways, I was still that little girl who was scared and needed that ultimate authority to come into my life and tell me that I was okay. I have nothing to fear. I never told my parents that I was scared, but my dad knew me, and he knew that he needed to come reassure me. That's the kind of father my dad was. He anticipated my needs before I even knew there was a need. He always made sure that every time I took a step, I would land on solid ground. I realized that I never feared anything my entire life. I always believed that I was out there blazing my own trail. I never realized that he had been there the whole time, laying down the foundations. To be honest, it's hard for me to believe that when I come home, open the front door, I'm not going to go into his room, sit on that armchair, and ask, "How are you, Daddy?" There just seems to be so many milestones and moments we were supposed to experience together. My dad always had such big dreams for me and my sister. During one of our last talks about my career this summer, my dad urged me to keep an open mind while I was still in law school. It wasn't that there was a certain status or position that he wanted me to achieve, although he did suggest White House legal counsel as a career option. But he told me that there were so many important policy issues in the world that need people. My dad wanted so much for us to be big people who would do our part to make this world just a little bit better. I never thought that he wouldn't be there to see me graduate from law school or my sister from college. I remember last year my mom bought me a pair of heels and my dad just loved them. He thought they made me look very ladylike. He kept telling me that for my wedding, he was going to buy me another pair just like that. I never imagined that my dad will not be there to walk me down the aisle. That was supposed to be our moment together. But I want to thank all of you for your incredible love and support that have truly gone beyond all measure. Thank you because you personally carried us through some of the toughest times we faced. You lifted us up in prayer when we felt like we couldn't stand. It didn't matter whether we were in the hospital or at home. We were constantly surrounded by people who loved and cared for us deeply. Through this long, dark journey, we never took one step alone. Our words can never fully express the gratitude that we feel. It really has been a blessing to sit here last night and today and to hear you share your memories of my dad. Through your sharing, I feel like I have a more complete understanding of him. He may not be here physically, but it is so, so great to hear how he was a part of your life. Growing up, I always found myself thinking about where I would go next and what I would do next. I felt like the world had so much to offer and so much to explore. However, this past summer, and especially today, I have an overwhelming feeling that I've come home. Among you, I find my uncles and aunts, my brothers and sisters. This is where I belong. You are my family. In this past year and a half, Laurie and I would try our best to come home often on the weekends. We always had a really great time when the four of us were together. As my dad got weaker, it became harder and harder to face that moment of separation. I think my dad sensed that too, because one day he called us together and he said he had a really great weekend and was really happy to spend time with us. He said that he knew that we had tried our best to bring him good news and interesting stories about our lives so that we can be happy and laugh together. However, we also knew that he had to go in for another round of chemo the next day, and that burden was becoming heavier each week. We were so reluctant for that weekend to end. He smiled and he told us that as we go our separate ways this week, we will pray for each other. He said, Mommy and Daddy will pray for you too, and you too will pray for Mommy and Daddy. Through prayer, we will stay together as a family until we see each other again. To be honest, there were so many times this week that I sat down to pray, only to realize that I don't know how to pray. I simply don't have words. But I believe deeply in my heart that my dad is in heaven right now, before the throne of God, earnestly praying for me, my mom, and my sister. I believe he is also praying for this church family. He loved the house of God so, so much. He held you so near and dear to his heart. Papa, I wanted to tell you that I love you so much and that I really, really miss you. But we will keep praying together. You will pray for us, and we will pray for each other. And that's how we will stay together as a family until we see each other again, never to be separated. Thank you.